Okay, this was supposed to be a video about the recent shit show that's the Disney Plus series known as Willow. I've now seen the first 4 episodes, and let me tell you, it's just about the worst thing I've ever watched, and that's not even just me being hyperbolic. I feel like I should also add that if you don't think the original 1988 film is very good, I'm not going to try and convince you otherwise. It was made in a different era, and as someone that has sentimental attachment to the film, I'm obviously willing to admit my own bias. The movie hasn't aged as well as other high-budget films from the same time period, but I think it's still fair to say that the original movie is far superior to this god-awful, bastardized Disney remake in just about every way imaginable. I was going to use this video to go through every aspect of the show, the shitty casting, the CW quality script, the horrendous acting, tearing them each apart piece by piece and presenting every glaringly awful flaw in all its gory detail. But if I'm being honest, it would have taken several videos just to catalog every cringe-inducing line uttered by one of the talentless actors that they cast in the show. So as I was struggling with finding the time to script this video due to an unforeseen family tragedy, something far more interesting began to develop. So I'll leave the commentary on Willow to other creators that have already mocked and destroyed this show comprehensively, and instead focus on the topic at hand. And that topic, as you probably guessed by now, is the ongoing saga that is Henry Cavill and his sudden departure from not only The Witcher, but just as disturbingly from the role of Superman as well.
Fuck.
Henry Cavill, for all the uninitiated out there, is probably one of the biggest names currently in Hollywood, in an era where star power seems to be in extremely short supply. Whether it's because of the dedication he gives to all his roles, his nerd-like nature and the hobbies that he keeps, or just because he's one giant-ass piece of eye candy, Henry Cavill should be able to land just about any leading role in Hollywood. Fans far and wide adore him, and his co-stars tend to express nothing but praise and admiration for the English actor. Cavill first landed the role of Superman back in 2013's Man of Steel, and I don't think it's debatable that he's pretty much perfect for the role in every way. The only real problem is that he faced in playing probably the most iconic superhero of all time was the incompetence of Warner Brothers. I know, shocking. DC in the hands of Warner Brothers has been horribly mismanaged to the point of utter embarrassment. Shows like Batwoman and the recently shelved Batgirl film, the ongoing legal issues surrounding the Flash star Ezra Miller, and the mass fan outrage over Amber Heard retaining her Aquaman 2 role are all a gigantic black eye in the face of DC. Recently brought in CEO David Zaslav has been slashing budgets and scrapping anything that isn't making money, most notably the recently launched CNN Plus service that was dead on arrival. Add into this that DC has yet to be able to catch lightning in a bottle quite the same way that the MCU has for the past 15 years. Comic book sales aside, Marvel has slapped the shit out of DC in their ability to string together one continuous universe of characters and stories, even despite Phase 4 being a massive letdown. With this high level of instability, it was time for DC to make some big moves. One of the most notable moves was the recent hiring of James Gunn, director of the Guardians of the Galaxy franchise, to take over as head decision-maker for DC moving forward. This felt like a step in the right direction, especially after DC put a teaser of Cavill's Superman in the post-credit scene of Black Adam. Surely, if anyone could team up and save DC, it would be Gunn and Cavill. But to everyone's surprise, including the actor himself, Cavill instead was called in to meet with Gunn and was informed that his tumultuous tenure as the Man of Steel was officially over. In quote, "I have just had a meeting with James Gunn and Peter Safran, and it's sad news, everyone. I will, after all, not be returning as Superman. After being told by the studio to announce my return back in October prior to their hire, this news isn't the easiest, but that's life." While Cavill spent the last few years unsure of his standing with DC, he had already embarked on another passion project. Netflix adaptation of the book series and former Game of the Year, The Witcher. As a fan of The Witcher books and games, Cavill was over the moon for the chance to take on the role of Geralt of Rivia, the brooding, wenching, monster-slaying protagonist. And let me tell you, he played it very well. While Season 1 didn't win over the most dedicated fans of the games and books, it was obvious that Cavill and the showrunners still tried to capture the essence of Geralt and the world that he lived in, even if the first season didn't have quite enough monsters for my taste. Add to that there was a certain level of modernizing that took place with the script and with casting, and it was pretty clear that this wouldn't be a completely faithful adaptation. Fair enough, there were obvious intentional changes, but the show was still pretty solid. Then came Season 2. Alright, so I'm going to be honest and say that I still enjoyed the second season for the most part. I understand a lot of the criticism and think it's apparent now why there was so much backlash. The most common complaint that I heard, aside from the second season moving too slowly, was that the show heavily focused on the female characters, and basically sidelined Geralt from a lot of the storyline. This I was a tad worried about myself, but I tried to remain optimistic. Then they did the unthinkable. The showrunner killed Geralt's steed and only real companion, his horse Roach. What possessed them to make this decision? At the time I couldn't guess. It was only discovered later on that Cavill and the showrunner were at such great odds over the decision that Cavill threatened to walk off the set. Apparently the original script killed off his beloved horse in a comical, almost slapstick kind of way. Cavill would have none of it. As a compromise, they gave him a slightly more dignified death, although death doesn't have much dignity in my opinion, not when it's at the hand of deranged ideologues. This was the first major drop in the bucket that has turned from a few ripples into what's now a massive tidal wave. Season 3 of The Witcher has finally wrapped filming, and Cavill wasted no time in announcing that he was walking away from the show for good. In a social media post in November, he announced his departure. Quote, "My journey as Geralt of Rivia has been filled with both monsters and adventures, and alas, I will be laying down my medallion and my swords for Season 4. End quote. Many suspected that this was because he was planning to reprise his role as Superman, but something far more malevolent was apparently at work. In a Q&A back in October, Beau DeMayo, a former writer for the show that is now in charge of X-Men 97 for Marvel, shed some light on what transpired behind the scenes with The Witcher. In his own words, quote, "Some of the writers were not fans or actively disliked the books and games, even actively mocking the source material," end quote. This lines up completely with the story about Roach's undignified demise, as well as Cavill hanging up his swords after only 3 seasons. It's no shock to me that DeMaio isn't letting anyone near his X-Men 97 project unless they are a self-professed fan of the IP. So that's where we are now. Henry Cavill, a man still in his prime, has walked away from the role of a lifetime and has been cast aside from a role that he's perfect for. On top of all this, he's been under attack from critics for several months now for the perceived crime of being a man. Yes, I wish I was making this shit up. He has had people trying to cancel him for comments he made in 2018 regarding the now infamous Me Too movement. Guess what? He was right. Has-beens and nobodies like Frosk, you remember Frosk, right?
Sexism in gaming.
Attacked him for dating someone younger than him, and also for having dated problematic ex-Hollywood actress Gina Carano. Now, in an apparently leaked transcript from a Spotify podcast, one of the writers claimed that Cavill was misogynistic, toxic, engaged in gamer bro language, didn't want to take off his shirt, was disrespectful to all the women on the set. You get the idea. They even go on to claim that he's basically QAnon adjacent and is addicted to video games, even to the point where he couldn't show up on time because of them. All of this is on the heels of Cavill getting another shot at the role of a lifetime, producing and acting in a Warhammer 40k adaptation for Amazon. Now, I'm as hesitant to be hopeful about this show as anyone else, and I'm not even a Warhammer fan, but I do know enough about Warhammer to know that it has a huge and faithful fan base as well as a long history of being labeled toxic by ideologues in the mainstream media. What's worse is that despite Cavill producing and starring in the show, is that it's being funded by Amazon Studios. You know, the company that allowed the worst, most bastardized adaptation that's ever existed to be made, also known as Rings of Power. So let's step back and assess the situation. It's possible Warhammer will be a good show. It's possible it will help save Henry Cavill's career. But it's also likely that much like The Witcher, Cavill's passion alone will not be able to stop the abuse of the IP from activists inside of Amazon. If this happens, I truly believe Cavill's Hollywood career will be over. Why does this matter? In theory, it doesn't. I could live without any new movies or TV shows and live happily off of reruns for the rest of my life. I barely watch TV as it is anymore. But what troubles me about this disturbing trend that we're seeing is that it doesn't just stay on the silver screen. It ekes and oozes into everyday culture. Traditional masculine roles are pretty much a thing of the past, at least that's what the TikTok generation would have you believe. Testosterone levels are dropping and more men are disengaging from dating and from the workforce. Military enrollment is at an all-time low. I have to believe that the narrative being pushed by Hollywood and social media plays at least some small part in that. Especially when companies like Disney, that have historically created family-friendly content, have begun to court the woke mob in favor of its more conservative audience. It's not an exaggeration to say that Disney has actively engaged in a war against traditional gender norms. Look no further than Kathleen Kennedy, the head of Lucasfilm. She's a feminist ideologue that has now done her best to destroy 3 beloved franchises: Star Wars, Indiana Jones, and Willow. In each and every sequel that she's been involved in, the traditional leading man has taken a backseat to a smarter, stronger, more capable woman. Men are becoming a joke. And what's worse is that because acting has always attracted a large percentage of progressive men, there aren't many action heroes or macho men in this next generation of actors. Nobody's going to be replacing Harrison Ford, Sylvester Stallone, Bruce Willis, Tom Cruise, Denzel Washington, Bruce Lee, Chuck Norris, Tom Selleck, or any of the rest of them. Instead, modern-day Hollywood openly mocks and shits on the idea that there is any need for what they deem as toxic masculinity. If this has all left you a little black-pilled, I completely understand. But take heart in the fact that every time Hollywood and the mainstream media do their best to attack, smear, and destroy what they perceive to be toxic fandoms, the fandom pushes back harder than ever before. There's a reason that Lauren Hissrich is begging people to keep watching The Witcher. There's a reason that Amazon paid off major news sites for favorable reviews and giant fluff pieces for their shit show. And there's a reason that the director of that fucking turd of a show, Willow, has openly begged Kathleen Kennedy to let them have a second season. Woke Hollywood is collapsing. We will ultimately win in the end. It's just unfortunate that it will be at the expense of many of our beloved franchises. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if so, please consider leaving a like and subscribing. This will be my last video till next year, and so I definitely appreciate it. Stay safe and have a very Merry Christmas.